Good morning and welcome to another ironic introduction to another video. Today I pulled Invisible Woman in the, let's call it Crystal Extravaganza that I had, and I wanted to do kind of like a ability rundown as well as some tips and tricks that I find as an amateur. Of course, if you can play her perfectly, it's best to stack her as high as possible and play her with like a special 2 spam, but I want to give you my perspective from a slightly less stressful, a little more fun, slash like what I'll be doing in the arena to just get use out of her, because she is fun and I will be ranking her up to rank 3 when I get the chance, just to kind of break up the monotony. But that said, if you want to skip the ability rundown, I will put a timestamp in the description below. But for those of you who want the ability rundown, let me go ahead and get started. So her awakened ability, which I don't have here, but I have here on AmpMy, a great website, is Invisible Woman turns invisible at the start of the fight, but is not paused. She has a 10% chance, scales all the way up to 60%, chance to turn invisible when she is knocked down, and when the opponent misses, the force field gains back 1.05% of its starting value, goes all the way up to 10%. A very solid awakened ability and very useful for her as a champion. It's definitely going to be great benefit, probably not like mandatory for the champion, but definitely a good benefit to the champion. Kind of like a fast rundown is passive. While dodging backwards, she does not take damage from attacks. She has a 20% chance to perfect block. She has reduced physical resistance. I don't know if they needed to put that in the passive or if they could have just done that in the stats, but maybe they want that to be like highlighted. For each debuff on the opponent, Invisible Woman's attacks deal an additional 4% damage dealt as physical damage. This appears as a red number, not additive to your original damage. The pre-fight ability, when it is active, she has bonus attack, but also drains the force field by 5% with each hit. You don't want to ever activate this unless you like absolutely need burst damage for some reason. When she starts the fight with the force field's maximum strength is equal to 10% of her maximum health, and it scales with boosts and buffs. When she would take damage other than from a special 3, the force field takes up to 90% of the damage instead. Her physical and energy resistance are increased by 326.47. I do believe that is only when the force field is active. When the force field runs out, it goes into a cooldown for 20 seconds, after which it will reform at 100% strength. If for some reason it does not reform, it goes into cooldown for 10 seconds after that. Invisibility passive. She turns invisible whenever she would dodge an attack or the force field is depleted. Invisibility lasts for 2 seconds but starts paused if she's not bleeding. While invisible, incoming attacks have a 100% chance to miss as long as Invisible Woman is not blocking or dodging, and critical rating is increased by 3,435. You know, a fairly large chunk. Invisibility is unpaused when Invisible Woman blocks an attack, an opponent misses, or an opponent hits Invisible Woman. When invisibility expires, it goes into cooldown for 10 seconds. Vulnerability debuffs. When she would turn invisible, she places a vulnerability debuff on the opponent to a maximum of 50. When attacking a vulnerable opponent, increased critical damage rating by 30.08 and decrease their block proficiency by 10%. All vulnerability debuffs are purified when invisibility expires. Whenever a vulnerability debuff is purified, invisibility expires immediately. If the force field is active, 65% chance to exhaust the opponent, decreasing critical damage rating by 53.8 for 5 seconds whenever you are attacked. The opponent's power gains effects are also reduced by 25% for each exhaustion debuff on them. Her special 1, on the last hit, if the force field is active, you add 25% to the force field strength. If the force field is not active, there is a 50% chance for it to become active at 50% strength. Her special 2, the first hit grants a Fury for 9 seconds, increasing your attack rating by about 500, scaling with the current force field strength, and then the force field is drained. If the attack is blocked, Invisible Woman has a 50% chance to turn invisible. And finally, her special 3, if the force field is active, add a flat 100% to the force field's current strength. If it's on cooldown, it is instead restored at 100% strength, and it pauses invisibility on Invisible Woman, and it cannot unpause for 6 seconds. That said, I will stick a timestamp in the description below, but here I want to go through some tips as well as kind of run through some synergies here. She does have increased block proficiency, perfect block chance, as well as a weakness debuff if you're running all 3 of these synergies here with force block. Third one not available, but it's probably Mr. Fantastic. Don't think that's a relevant synergy at the moment unless you're running her on defense for Alliance War and you want to run all 4 for like champion diversity. When the opponent activates a special, if a force field is active, it gains 10% strength for each bar of power spent. Again, probably with Mr. Fantastic. She has a Just Friends synergy with Namor, which is just plus 5% health. But the one that I want to touch on is Unfazed. Whenever the opponent misses, generate 10% of a bar of power, and that synergizes with the Hood. So if you're running Ghost, the Hood is optimal. Darkhawk, which is a solid option to have on your team if you just want to run Invisible Woman and Darkhawk. Ebony Maw, which I don't know why you would put him on your team. And Mysterio, who might potentially be a better option than Darkhawk. We just kind of have to wait and see where his power level falls when he gets released. That said, I think that if you are a perfect player, optimally, you would be spamming Special 2, of course, for that Fury buff. But as an amateur, I personally believe it's better to wait for a Special 3, just because you do get that 6 seconds of ability to parry and punish the opponent with damage. And I will show you that you don't need to build 50 stacks to deal damage. I'm going to jump in here onto a class advantage fight because, you know, I really want to give her every benefit I can if I can. And the power gain won't be relevant, but you're going to see there's a pretty high PI difference here, hero rating, as my Invisible Woman's going to have like 2,800 and this Ghost Rider's going to have like 9,000, a little under 9,000 maybe. Let me get into this fight. So, you can see, damage isn't miserable. She's no boss killer, but I'm going to go invisible here. Nope, couldn't beat the special with that. Okay, I should have dexed that. Oh, I thought I was going to go into my Special 3 there, but if I hadn't screwed that up, that would have pushed me into my Special 3, and I would have been able to end this fight here. But you can see 49 hits is not great, but 51 hits to end the fight there. Not the worst. You don't feel the stress of stacking if you actually spend time punching into your opponent. And when you give her that class advantage option, she does do a little bit better. I'm going to jump into a Winter Soldier fight here as well, just because he's got a little more health. You know, if I screw up and I just die, I'll give it a second try, just to kind of give the best option for me there. But if I can't do this in 2 tries, well, maybe I will spam it and put a highlight out, just to kind of give you guys what I'm trying to show you. But I want to show you that if you're trying to get value out of her, kind of like as a novice or an amateur, now you don't have to think about stacking to 50 stacks. You just have to make sure that you get some stacks for, you know, an amount of damage. Because she still does an okay amount of damage even at lower levels. And the important part is that, you know, when you're running Suicide Masteries, you don't always have the largest pool of Suicide Mastery friendly champions. You know, so you want to get value out of everyone you can. Okay, you see the timer, and I can pause it here with my Special 3. Now, this wasn't great. I didn't get a whole lot of exhaustion stacks, but all I'm trying to show you is that I'm going to stay permanently invisible here. So it's actually, I'm allowed to just dash in here immediately afterwards and not have to worry about punishment. I get to parry, get some free damage in. I don't have to worry about... Oh, I didn't get the parry off. That was bad. Sorry. I was hoping I could get a little bit longer. Okay, I never claimed to be a perfect player, but thankfully I got to show you what I was trying to do, and I can leave it at that. So my point is that if you let yourself build up to a Special 3, you can get an okay amount of damage output from her. It's nothing exceptional, and I think that she's really best used as a counter, or if your like roster's not in the highest amounts, you know. But the most important thing is that you could potentially build her up the same way people use higher skill tier champions. And when you use that special 3 opportunity, what it does is it gives you the opportunity to like practice her without getting repeatedly punished over and over, right? Because really, if you're trying to practice her like I am, you want to be able to use her without just instantly dying with her every time, and or doing absolutely no damage because you spend 20 minutes every fight just practicing building up exhaustions. So that said, this is all I have as far as like an ability rundown, some tips and tricks I have, you know, and hopefully, you know, if you decide to use her, if you decide to get any kind of value out of her over time, you can push up forward, you know, as far as you can. Shoot, one more thing, sorry. Invisible Woman puts exhaustion stacks on your opponent, and the Mastery Despair, debuffs applied to enemies reduce their healing and regeneration effects by 15% each. That is at max rank 3. So I do want to point out that if you are stacking several exhaustion debuffs on them, I don't have the ability to test this. As you can see, I don't have it unlocked. But if you do have the ability to test it, or you do have information on this, I think that you can actually use Invisible Woman to counter regeneration. So that said, there's my kind of like, you know, end of video last tip. But that said, this video has gone on longer than it needs to, and I will talk to you all later.